Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Elizabeth timeline revision video. So it all starts in 1533 with Elizabeth. She's born to Anne Boleyn, and remember, Anne Boleyn was Protestant. Anne Boleyn, though, is executed by Henry because she is accused of adultery. And so as a result, Elizabeth is actually at one point declared illegitimate, and she is removed from the succession, which means at one point it's stated that Elizabeth will never be able to be a monarch. So it's fair to say that in terms of Elizabeth's childhood, it is not necessarily typical, and she is seen by some in England to be illegitimate, especially Catholics. So in 1542, Mary, Queen of Scots, is made the Queen of, should be Queen of Scotland there at just the age of 6 days old. Then when Henry VIII dies in 1547, the son, Henry's son, Edward VI, is made the King of England. At this point in time, it's important that you know that the Netherlands was ruled by the Spanish. So the Spanish were one of the most powerful countries in Europe, and they had lots of influence, and certainly they had lots of control over the Netherlands, just the other side of the English Channel from England. But Edward dies in 1553, and the next person to become monarch is Elizabeth's older half-sister, Mary I. However, she then dies in 1558, and so the next person in line to be queen is Elizabeth. However, there are some people that say that actually, because of Elizabeth's mother, actually she shouldn't be made queen, and it could actually go to someone else. And lots of people look at the family tree and think that Mary, Queen of Scots, has a very good claim to be the Queen of England because she was related to Henry VII, who was Henry VIII's father. Now, at this time, Mary, Queen of Scots, she marries the heir to the French throne. So she's got English royal blood, she's got Scottish royal blood, and now she's marrying into the French royal family. So Mary, Queen of Scots, is a very influential, very important person. And so when Elizabeth has her official coronation, she's 26 years old. She's unmarried. She's obviously a female queen. And so for some would look at her and think of her as being a weak queen. Now, she rules over a population of Catholics, but also Protestants. So she herself has been raised as a Protestant, so she is going to be mainly Protestant. However, she will allow some Catholic features to exist. So, for example, churches, she will allow decoration of churches, which will be a Catholic feature. And she will also ask priests not to wear really elaborate clothing, but she will allow them to wear some clothing that sets them apart from the normal people of the parish. So some of the main Protestant changes she introduces, she makes herself the head of the church, so that will remain. That's a very Protestant feature, but also the Bible will be in English. So this balance between Protestantism and Catholicism is known as the religious settlement, but not everyone is happy with it, especially Puritans, who are those very strict Protestants, and they, for example, did not like any decoration in churches, and they did not want priests to wear any vestments. They did not want them to be separated from the rest of the congregation. So France and Spain for a long, long time had actually had tension between them. However, in this period, France and Spain actually ended the tension between them. And we can see this is the Treaty of Cateau-Cambrésis. This means that now Spain and France no longer have tension between them. And it means that France actually in this period is becoming much weaker as a country. So this family tree clearly shows that both Mary, Queen of Scots, and Elizabeth had a claim to be Queen of England at the time. They both had royal blood in them. So England and Scotland had historically been rivals, and there had been lots of attempted invasions of England through Scotland. So historically, the French had worked with the Scottish and in order to try and invade England. However, this ends in 1560 because England and Scotland actually are improving their relations. And then from the 1560s, we start to see Scottish Protestants starting to really gain in control and influence in this country. Okay, and then the French are also forced to leave. So this is another example of French power decreasing in this period. So Mary, Queen of Scots, had married King Francis II of France. However, he dies in 1560. At this stage, Mary, Queen of Scots, had been living in France. However, after this, in 1561, she will now move to go and live in Scotland. So as I've said, France is entering a period of instability, and France is not a particularly strong country in this period. It has a civil war which starts in 1562 and it only will end in 1598. So it's the whole of this course, France is entering into a civil war. So this means now that neither England nor Spain need to really worry about France. France is no longer seen as a big threat. Now, we know that there's lots of poverty in Elizabethan England, and so there are some laws that are introduced to try and solve the problem of poverty. So in 1563, there's a poor law that's introduced, and it gives magistrates, so these will be local officials, it gives them power to raise local funds for poor relief. So they're going to take money from the local population as a form of taxation, and they're going to use that money to try and help poorer people. Now, it's not completely effective because they actually give people the option of choosing how much they pay. Everyone has to pay something, but they tell people they can choose what they pay. If they don't, they will pay a fine. So it's not necessarily going to be that effective because some people just might not choose to pay very much at all. But it does show that the government is trying to solve the problem of poverty. So Mary's husband has died, and she now marries someone called Lord Darnley in Scotland. Now, remember we talked about people who were unhappy, Puritans who were unhappy with the religious settlement. They in particular didn't like the fact that priests were wearing special clothing. And one of these would be the surplice, is the name of like a gown that priests would wear. So Elizabeth asked the Archbishop of Canterbury, her top official in the church, to go around and ensure that all priests were wearing the surplice, and if not, they could be arrested or lose their job. So it shows that Elizabeth is trying to deal with some of the tension created by the religious settlement. Now in 1566, remember the Netherlands was ruled by the Spanish. Now the Dutch people, not all of them were happy with Spanish control, especially because there was a big religious difference. So the Spanish were Catholic and the Dutch, many of them were Protestant. And so we get in 1566 the start of the Dutch Revolt. So this is going to be Dutch people trying to reduce the influence of the Spanish in the Netherlands. So the Dutch Revolt is Dutch people fighting the Spanish. If you look here at a map of the Netherlands, you can see how close it is to England. It's very quick to sail from the Netherlands to England and back again. So there's a military threat. If you can control the Netherlands, you can very easily go and invade England. Now, remember, France wasn't a big threat to England at this time because France was going through a period of instability. But if you controlled the Netherlands, you could very easily invade England. So because the Spanish are there, England's very worried about the situation. The other situation with the Netherlands is lots of goods that were produced in England, such as wool products, when they were being sold into Europe, the English traders would ship them to the Netherlands, to places like Antwerp, and it's from there that they would be sold to the rest of Europe. So trade was really important in the Netherlands for England. So England is really always having to keep an eye on what's happening in the Netherlands for military reasons, but also for trade and commercial reasons. So Mary, Queen of Scots, her second husband now dies, Lord Darnley, and he's actually murdered. So someone called the Earl of Bothwell in Scotland is blamed for it. And strangely, then Mary then goes on to marry Bothwell. So this is controversial, and people are going to start questioning Mary, Queen of Scots, in Scotland. And look, lo and behold, in 1567, there's a big rebellion against Mary, Queen of Scots in Scotland, and she's placed in prison. So the Protestant powerful lords are starting to challenge Mary, Queen of Scots. Remember, she is Catholic, and yeah, as I say, she is placed in prison. At the same time, the Spanish fleets of ships, they decide to sail to the Netherlands because of the Dutch revolt. So now there's going to be a big Spanish military presence in the Netherlands. At the same time, the English ships were starting to operate in Mexico. Now, Mexico was a Spanish colony, but the English wanted to be active in the area because they knew that there were precious natural resources such as silver there, and they knew that this was a source of wealth. So they're trying to operate in these places. However, the Spanish didn't always let them operate. So the Spanish sink 4 English ships near Mexico in 1568. And then as revenge, what happened was there was some gold that was going to Italy that was meant for the Spanish in the Netherlands. And if you go back to this map, you can see that if anything's going to be going from Spain and Italy, sailing it to the Netherlands, you go right past the coast of England. And what happened is one of these boats blew off course and it went into England. And England, under Elizabeth's direction, they stole the gold that was meant for the Spanish Netherlands. And this is known as the Genoese loan. So Mary, Queen of Scots, has been imprisoned by Scottish powerful Protestants. However, she escapes in 1568 and she goes to England from Scotland. So Elizabeth has the option here. She could either just say, Mary, Queen of Scots, you have to go back to prison in Scotland. We're not going to protect you here in England. Or she could just let Mary, Queen of Scots stay free in England and do what she wants. Now, she makes a decision in the end that she won't send her back to Scotland. She will allow Mary, Queen of Scots, to stay in England, but she will be placed under house arrest. Elizabeth places her under house arrest because she knows that many people in England actually think that Mary, Queen of Scots, should be Queen of England. And so they're hoping that by putting her under house arrest, they can keep a close eye on her, make sure she's not plotting against Elizabeth. It doesn't necessarily work because there are plots against Elizabeth, and the first one is the revolt of the Northern Earls. For your revision, you will have to go and do some extra revision and see exactly what happens in each plot. But this first one, it fails. And all of these plots have the same thing in common. They're all based around the idea that Mary, Queen of Scots, should replace Elizabeth as Queen of England. Now, in 1570, the Pope, Pius V, he excommunicates Elizabeth I. And this essentially means that Elizabeth will not be protected by God anymore. So, for example, if a Catholic decided to go and murder Elizabeth I, this would not be a crime for Catholics. So it's actually giving a green light for Catholics to go and attempt to kill and assassinate Elizabeth I. So this places Elizabeth, there's a higher risk associated with Elizabeth now. Then we get the next plot. So this is the Rodolphi plot, and this is, again, it's based on the idea that Mary, Queen of Scots, would be Queen of England. She would marry the Duke of Norfolk, and Spain would help. So at this stage, Elizabeth knows that there's a lot of wealth to be had, money to be made in the New World, the Americas, places like South America, Central America. So she hires Drake as a privateer, and he starts attacking the Spanish in the Americas. So first of all, in Panama in 1572. Now, Drake is technically hired by Elizabeth I, but when she's hiring these privateers and allowing them to operate, she makes it seem as if they haven't been hired by her. So when the Spanish are complaining, she says, well, actually, I know they're stealing from you, but they're not necessarily, it's nothing to do with me. So we spoke about lots of the poverty. In 1572, there are a selection of laws that are introduced to try and deal with the problem of poverty. So there is an act in 1572, the Fifth Vagabonds Act, that is designed to help poor people. And there's a poor law as well, which this is now going to give local officials the power to decide how much tax is to be paid. Before, do you remember, people could choose what they paid? Now they're actually saying, no, the local officials can tell people exactly how much they should pay. And usually it's going to be based on the idea that wealthier people should pay more. However, they're still going to be quite harsh on people who they think do not deserve to be helped. So remember, there are two categories. There was the idea of the deserving poor and the undeserving poor. Deserving poor were people who maybe had some sort of disability and couldn't work. These people felt they deserved to be helped because they just couldn't work. It wasn't possible for them. However, people who could have worked, maybe they were able-bodied, and people felt like they could have actually gone and got a job. If those people were begging on the street, that would be a crime, and those people could have a hole bored through their right ear, and repeat offenders could be executed or first of all sent to prison. Now, Elizabeth realizes that there's a rivalry between England and Spain. There's this rivalry, there's this religious difference, but also there's this big commercial rivalry as well. And Elizabeth realizes that if the Spanish control the Netherlands, that's a big risk to Elizabeth, especially because the Spanish could just block English trade going into the Netherlands. And we know the Netherlands were so important. So Elizabeth makes the decision. She makes a decision that in this conflict between the Dutch rebels and the Spanish, she wants the Dutch rebels to win. So she could send soldiers to go and help fight with the Dutch rebels, but she doesn't want to provoke a war between England and Spain. She doesn't think England will win that war. So what she does is she actually just sends money and weapons to the Dutch rebels. This is clearly not, the Spanish are not going to like this, but it's not enough for them to go to war against England. And remember also the Spanish at this stage, they're having to deal with this big uprising in the Netherlands. They won't have time to go and attack England. So Elizabeth thinks this is a good thing to do at this stage. But also, don't think that England and Spain are completely at war in this period. They are actually attempting peace. And this makes sense because, as I said, Spain is more worried about the Netherlands in this period, and England doesn't necessarily want a war because that would be too costly. And Spain is one of the most powerful countries in Europe and maybe even in the world. So another poor law in 1576. This means that anyone who's refusing work can be sent to prison. And as we've seen, the Spanish are not necessarily finding the situation in the Netherlands easy at all. The war is they're finding the war very expensive. And actually what's happening is Spanish soldiers are not being paid by the Spanish government. So there are loads of Spanish soldiers who are operating in the Netherlands and they're unhappy because they've not been paid. So what they start doing is they start actually stealing money from places in the Netherlands. And so famously in 1576, we have the sack of Antwerp. Antwerp was a pretty wealthy town known for lots of merchants being there and traders. And the Spanish soldiers simply go there and steal loads of stuff from the people of Antwerp. And so this is a really big moment for the Dutch rebels because before this point, some Dutch rebels had hated the Spanish, but some had hated them a little bit, but they weren't always fully working together. And some Dutch people did not want to join the revolt against the Spanish. However, this is a bit of a turning point because lots of Dutch people suddenly are really angry against the Spanish, and all 17 Dutch provinces, they unite together, they join together against the Spanish. Okay. So Elizabeth realizes that she can help the Dutch rebels. The Spanish are looking relatively weak, and so she sends £100,000 from England to the Dutch rebels. At this stage, we get the Drake's journey to circumnavigate the world, which means essentially he's going to sail all around the world. Now, 1578, the war is actually going well for the Dutch, and they actually get the help of someone called the Duke of Alençon, or also called the Duke of Anjou. And he has said that he will help the Dutch as well. So this potentially is going to be a problem for the Spanish. And the Duke of Alençon is just a very powerful French landowner. And he's thinking that if he can help the Dutch rebels, he might actually be able to increase his own wealth and be able to gain territory in the Netherlands as well. However, things start getting better for the Spanish in the Netherlands, because in 1579, the Duke of Parma, a military commander, he takes control of the Spanish army, and they actually are able to regain control in the Netherlands. So this is not a good moment for Elizabeth, because the Dutch rebels are looking weaker again. 1580, Drake has been sailing around the world, and he's also been attacking Spanish possessions. However, controversially, Elizabeth then knights him, so he becomes Sir Francis Drake. And obviously the Spanish will look at this and think that they will be unhappy that Elizabeth has knighted someone who has been attacking the Spanish. Philip II, who's the king of Spain, also becomes the king of Portugal. So Spain now controls Portugal as well from this period. So 1582, we know that the Spanish have regained control, but the Duke of Alençon Anjou, he then takes an army to go and fight the Spanish in the Netherlands, but he's defeated, and he'd actually been given money by Elizabeth, £70,000. So we can see in 1583, the Duke of Anjou has failed in his attempt to control the Netherlands, so the Spanish still are in control. There's another plot this time, a Catholic plot in England against Elizabeth, and it's the Throckmorton plot. And here, the plan is going to involve the French army will be paid for by Spain, and the Pope is also involved. That again fails. Also in this period, England realizes that there's so much money to be made in the Americas, and they want to create their own colonies as well. So what they do is, Sir Walter Raleigh, he sends a fact-finding mission to North America. So they're going to go and explore, see if there's any places that haven't been colonized, and they're going to try and work out if there's a possibility that England creates a colony. And they do find this place called Roanoke, and they decide that later on, they think it's a good place for English settlers. They're going to sail back to England, and then later on, they're going to actually send English settlers, colonists, to go and live on Roanoke. Now, 1584 is a very, very, very worrying moment for England and Elizabeth, because there's a huge anti-Protestant alliance between France and Spain. England is now targeted. So if you go back to look at the map, England has now a big rivalry with Spain. Portugal is part of Spain, and now France as well. France as well has joined the Spanish against the English. So look, England and Elizabeth, they're starting to feel like they've been surrounded. But she does have the Duke of Alençon on her side. However, he's died. He dies in 1584, and obviously he had been helping the English fight the Spanish in the Netherlands. There's also an ally that England has, and is William the Silent in the Netherlands. So one of the main Dutch rebel leaders is then assassinated. He's killed, and so the Dutch rebels now have no leader, and they're now vulnerable. So this is bad for England. England has lost one of their main allies who could have helped them in Europe. So we talked about Raleigh they discovered Roanoke. Now they decide to send 5 ships to Virginia with 108 settlers on board. And these settlers are English settlers, and they will hopefully start building this English colony up in North America. So it gets to 1585. Elizabeth realizes that if the Spanish control the Netherlands, England will be completely surrounded by enemies. And Elizabeth really, really wants the Netherlands to be ruled by a group who are actually friendly to England. So Elizabeth wants the Dutch rebels to be in charge, but she knows things are not going well for them. So she finally, in 1585, makes the decision that she's now going to send her army to the Netherlands. So this is clearly a war. It's a declaration of war. And so from 1585, England and Spain are now officially at war. Elizabeth knows she's going to need some money for fighting this war against Spain, so she asks Drake to go to the New World to go and raid Spanish possessions and ships there. Spain is still fighting in the Netherlands. So Spain is not going to be ready necessarily to fight England straight away. So in 1586, Spain starts preparing an armada, which will be a number of ships that the Spanish will use to sail over to England. Then their soldiers will be unloaded and they will go and invade England. 1586 is the Babington plot. So this is the final significant plot against Elizabeth. So you'll notice this period is getting quite serious for England here. Elizabeth is at war with Spain. There have now been 4 plots. We've had the Never Run to Bournemouth. So we've had the Revolt of the Northern Earls, R, Run, Rodolphi, T, Throckmorton, and now we've had the Babington plot. This is getting really serious for Elizabeth, and she's feeling like she's got enemies in England, but she's also now feeling that she's got loads of enemies abroad. Elizabeth, I imagine, would have been feeling like the world was against her at this stage. So 1586, the settlers had gone to Virginia, and Sir Francis Drake actually visited Roanoke with some English settlers. Some actually decided that when they saw him arrive, that they would actually go back to England with him, but some settlers stayed in Roanoke. Now it's getting even worse for England in the Netherlands, because Robert Dudley is Elizabeth's main military commander. He leads a campaign in the Netherlands, but it's pretty unsuccessful, and the Dutch rebels do not gain much at all. The Spanish are still in control. So the colony of Virginia is then abandoned by the English. So this first colony has not been successful. And it's in this period as well. We've had the 4 plots against Elizabeth. The war is going badly, and Elizabeth feels like she's got a lot of threats. It's in that moment, in this context, that she decides finally she will execute Mary, Queen of Scots in 1587. She does this reluctantly, but also from the Babington plot and the work of Walsingham and the spy network, there is clear evidence that Mary, Queen of Scots is involved. And she has also made it clear that she is happy for Elizabeth to be assassinated. So Elizabeth reluctantly makes the decision that she will have Mary, Queen of Scots, executed. So there's a 3rd expedition that arrives in Roanoke, but as they get there, they find that all of the other colonists who had gone previously have gone. They don't know where they've gone, and so 100 new settlers arrive to build a colony. At this stage, Elizabeth sends Drake to go and attack the Spanish building process in Spain. So Drake sends some ships to Cadiz Harbour, and they cause huge damage to the Spanish fleet. They don't completely destroy the Spanish fleet, but it does mean that the Armada is delayed by a year as it rebuilds. So it's buying England time. 1588, Philip finally launches the Armada. The Armada, we know, is not successful. As the Spanish ships are sailing near Calais and near the English Channel, the English send in fire ships. The Spanish had a very good disciplined formation, which was very difficult for the English to attack. But when the fire ships get sent in, the Spanish ships scramble. There's a battle at Gravelines in 1588, and the English don't really sink that many Spanish ships. But what happens is the Spanish ships are then forced northwards. They then decide that they will sail all around the north coast of Scotland and back around via Ireland back to Spain. And when that's happening, they run into loads of storms, and lots of Spanish ships are sunk. So the Spanish eventually go home. There's no successful invasion of England, and the English are said to have won the Spanish Armada. So in 1588, there were some supply ships that were supposed to go to Roanoke to give supplies to the colonists, the English settlers that were there, but they couldn't go because it's in the middle of the Spanish Armada. When they do eventually go in 1590, they turn up to find the English colonists, and they've all disappeared. So it's definitely fair to say that the first English attempts at colonization in North America are failures. But they do learn their lessons, and later on, after the period of this course, there will be some successful colonies. Elizabeth dies in 1603, but obviously the end of the course is 1588. I hope you found that useful. Take care.